Welcome, and thanks for joining us for this integrated arts lesson. I'm Kristen, and I want to share with you how you can integrate art into your classroom. We incorporated this project into a history classroom, but you could easily incorporate this into a social studies, English language arts, or science classroom as well. For this lesson, we will explore human impact on the environment and westward expansion in the United States. Students will use concepts of caricature drawing, composition, specifically line, value, and space, as well as general photography tips to create a unique photography project. This lesson was developed for high school students but could easily be adapted for other grades. To create this lesson in your classroom, you will need the following supplies. You will need scratch paper, pencils and erasers, transparency sheets, Sharpie type markers, whiteout or white paint pens. However, you may think of other items that meet your students' needs as well. Step 1. When developing this project, I was inspired by the work of Ombre McStees and the approach he takes into incorporating caricature art into the local environment. When teaching this lesson, encourage your students to explore the work of other artists who work with caricature art or photography as well. If possible, share images with your students of the area from the past and present to show how the area has changed over time. Ask students to identify how they think the area has changed over time. How have we changed the area? What would it look like if we didn't live here? Ask students to begin brainstorming on their piece of scratch paper. Ask them to begin thinking about what kind of message they want to communicate through this project. Step 2. Once your students have determined their message, begin exploring caricature drawing. Share a brief history of caricature drawing with your students and show them a few examples. Allow your students to sketch out a few caricature ideas on their scratch paper. Ideas for caricatures can include buildings, people, animals, plant life, etc. In general, caricature drawings can be insulting or complimentary. They typically use simplified or exaggerated features, which makes them less intimidating to draw. Encourage your students to break down the object that they're drawing into a few simplified shapes. Encourage your students to pick a few unique features to exaggerate. Then they can simplify the other features of the object. Caricature drawing tips. Identify unique characteristics of the object. Exaggerate the unique characteristics and simplify the other characteristics. Make it whimsical, playful, fanciful, or amusing. Use bold lines. Break the pieces that make the whole into basic shapes and then assemble. Look at examples of others' work, but don't copy. Be original. And then practice, practice, practice. So I took photos, one of a pig and one of a cat, just to demonstrate how you can simplify the object that you're drawing and people can still recognize what it is. So here is my pig. So you can see I used simple shapes. I have a circle for the head, an oval type shape slightly stacked behind the circle for the body, and then rectangle shapes for the feet. And you can see the face is mainly made up of circles and an oval. My drawing is not an exact realistic replica of a pig, but you can still recognize that it is a pig. I also made an example with a cat. So you can see I have a photo of the cat, and my drawing is very similar to my drawing of the pig. I'll grab that. So the two drawings are very similar, yet they communicate different things. You can tell that one is a pig and one is a cat, and I did that by identifying those unique features like the pig's nose, the cat's whiskers, and their tails, to give those identifying marks. So now it's time to start sketching your caricature ideas. If students don't have room, they can flip their paper over and draw on the backside. Step 3. Remind students that the goal is to work their caricature drawing into the local environment. So they need to be thinking about size of objects, shapes, and forms that are in that environment and how they can work that drawing into it. So encourage your students to start thinking about where they want to take their photographs. Also encourage your students to think about the size of their caricature drawing. If it's too small, it won't show up when they take their photo. They need to think about the length of their arm. We also encourage you to have your students create a final sketch of their caricature and the surrounding environment so they have a true understanding of how those two pieces will fit together. Once your students have determined the size of their caricature and have created their final sketch on scratch paper, they can begin creating their finished caricature on the transparency sheet. Begin by laying the transparency sheet directly on top of their sketch paper. Students can simply trace their caricature drawing with a Sharpie type marker on the transparency sheet, so they don't have to recreate the whole drawing again. Once the caricature is fully drawn on the transparency sheet, students can then flip it over and start filling in the drawing with whiteout or white paint pen. This may take more than one coat. Just make sure students let their paint dry fully before adding a second coat. Once students have fully drawn their caricature with the Sharpie, we found that it's best to flip the transparency sheet over and draw on the back side. That way your white paint pen or whiteout won't interact with the Sharpie and it's behind your lines. Step 5. Students are now ready to take photographs with their caricature. For this project, we worked with high school students and they all have their own cell phones. They took their photographs outside of class as homework. Any type of device that takes digital photographs will work, a tablet, a cell phone, or a digital camera. Before students begin taking their photos, discuss a few composition tips with them. Space is an important element of composition when taking these photos, because we want the caricature drawing to work within the space of the environment. The goal is to incorporate the artwork into the local environment in a way that makes sense. Value is another important element. Encourage your students to make sure they have a good range of values in their photograph so that the drawing can be easily seen. Line is a great way to incorporate visual interest to catch the viewer's eye. Diagonal lines help move the viewer's eye across the artwork to create a sense of movement. Also, remind students to slow down and let the camera focus to get a good quality image. Remind your students not to rely on zoom. Encourage them to walk closer to the object to get the best composition. Also, encourage your students to avoid using the flash on their camera as it washes out details and it may cause a strange glow in their transparency sheet. Encourage your students to take 5 or 6 photos of their caricature drawing so they have a selection to choose from and select the best photo. Step 6. When students have taken their photos, give them time to go through and review their photos to choose the one with the best composition. Remind students that their ultimate goal is to communicate their message through that combination of the photography and the caricature drawing. Once the final image has been chosen, it can be printed and displayed. We decided to have the students display their images collaboratively. We also gave them the option to choose how they arrange their photos in their display. You can choose to do this or have them displayed in a way that suits your class. Thank you for viewing our lesson, History Caricatures, a Photo Project. Here are a few examples of projects that students created. We hope that these lessons will inspire you to use art in your classroom and increase student self-expression and engagement with learning. If you would like to download copies of the lesson plan or view other helpful resources, please visit our website at svmoa.org. You won't want to miss our other videos that integrate arts into math, science, social studies, and English. This project is made possible by a grant from the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services and with support from Wendy and Alan Pesky.